We have done how, why, and where. But now we need to look at what. What do India need to do? What should they try? What? If you haven't seen any of those chapters, go back and have a look at them, because they'll show you how we got to the what. But let's start with the West Indies, or England in 2015. It would be easy for the West Indies to tear down their T20 team as it currently stands. You could argue that they don't currently have a T20 team. And England in 2015 was an utter pile of crap. Again, these are things where it is easy just to go, oh, everything we're doing isn't working and let's start again. Something had to happen. That doesn't mean the West Indies are going to get good or that England's rise was inevitable. But if West Indies keep going in the direction they are going, and if England kept going in the direction they were going, England wouldn't be the world champions, and the West Indies will never have a good T20 team again. And you might have to tear down a couple of times. You might argue West Indies have already tried to tear down once. The problem for India is that they are nowhere near as bad as the West Indies currently are, or England was in 2015. They're in what I would like to call the South African mode, of being too good to tear down, but also not good enough to actually win consistently at the top level. That is the toughest thing to be in professional sports. If you're good and you're winning, you can keep going with that. If you're bad and you're losing, you can try some new things. What if you're winning all the time, but not winning when it matters? Do you just say, oh, it's dumb luck and eventually we'll come right? Do you just say, well, we have the talent, maybe things just haven't fallen into place yet? Or do you actually just strip it all back and start again, knowing that you'll probably have a lot more losses in the short term? India adds so many layers to this that I don't think we've ever really seen in another sporting team ever. The hero status level. It is so hard to actually take some of these players out of their side. They're just too big to drop easily. You can't simply move on from Kohli. We saw that with the captaincy debacle. And even Rohit Sharma is going to be similar. There are no easy decisions for India right now. When to rebuild is one of the hardest questions that any top-level professional sports team ever does. Now, as I said before, anyone can react to failure. But how do you handle consistent success when your team doesn't ultimately win the biggest prize? That is where India is, and they're doing all this in the most glaring fishbowl that we've ever had in sport. They are caught between their own massive success and their infrequent but very important failures. But clearly something needs to change. But mostly what I've tried to do in this series so far is have a look at what hasn't worked. It probably doesn't need as many huge changes as perhaps the England setup needed, and West Indies might going into the future. But essentially, I think the biggest problem is this sort of conservative mindset, and it's completely swept over almost every part of Indian cricket. I'm sure older fans will say it was always there. And one of the things at the moment that India is caught between is the overseas league scenario. Now, the fact that England actually beat them was used to batter them over the head about this. India were playing England in Adelaide, with so many of the England players had actually played for the Strikers at one stage or another. So Adelaide was like a second or third home to some of them. And there's a few different levels to this, of course. I understand from a marketing and brand perspective why keeping your top players only for the IPL matters, especially early on, because while the others may have the word Premier in them, IPL is the only actual Premier League. I'm not sure that makes as much sense now from a business standpoint, just because the IPL is already the biggest league by such a wide margin, and it's only going to get wider. Even if they let the Indian players occasionally play out, it just wouldn't affect the IPL standing. It might bump up some of the other leagues, but nowhere near the level of the IPL. But the interesting thing about this is that Rahul Dravid said something different. He said he didn't want the Indian players to end up like the West Indians. Now that just doesn't make any sense to me. The reason West Indian cricketers are turning freelance isn't because they play in other leagues. It's because their board can't come anywhere near matching their pay. I'm not going to do a West Indian history lesson here, but from Leary Constantine all the way through to the T20 players, West Indian players have always had to play overseas to actually be proper professionals. That is not the case with current Indian cricketers. Dravid also mentioned not wanting to weaken the Ranji. But there are so many leagues now. I can't see how they couldn't find the ones that would work for them if it was an in-house system. And I'll explain more about that in a moment. The issue here is that the world's best T20 players are involved in multiple leagues, and it means that other teams have more specialist options available to them. It means many of the world's best players learn different methods and how to adapt on new wickets, fit into different change rooms, all these different things that help them actually get slightly better, plus they're actually having to play for their supper. So far, the Indian players are spared the hassle of this, but also the learnings. So if you do ignore the marketing reasons, and you agreed that Indian players could learn more by playing in overseas leagues, I believe that the BCCI starts this conversation from a position of strength. Because every league in the world is desperate for Indians to be in it. Now, I could see why there would be no reason for Jasprit Bumrah or Virat Kohli to play in any of those leagues. And there's no reason for the BCCI not to be smart with this. For instance, you could have a rule that says only players under the age of 23 and use it like a development system. And then only in pre-approved leagues. Or the other way you could do it is have a selected crew of players with a tournament coming up ahead. For instance, let's just hypothesize that there was a World Cup in 2024 in the USA and the West Indies, because there is. And before that, there will be CPL and Major League Cricket being played. How hard would it be to get a player in each franchise for those events? It would not be hard at all. When Jarrod is talking about the West Indies freelance thing, he's really talking about it from an old-fashioned sense of the idea of letting players go everywhere. The BCCI never has to fall into that trap. What some teams are now starting to do is actually talking to agents, managers, coaches of different teams in different franchises to see if they can fit their player into a specific role that might help them develop for the national team. I don't think it'll be that far away from someone at a cricket board whose job it is to get their international players into those franchise leagues. The BCCI isn't going to have their players go freelance, but what they should be thinking about is planning on how to get them into those leagues and the ones that would be the most handy to them specifically. Instead of fearing that everything will go wrong, India should be using the system and their power within it to their advantage. The conservative option is what they are going with now, and the progressive one is to go out in the world and make their players better. There are probably times earlier in this video series where it sounds like I've been really negative about India. But in truth, let me remind you that while they haven't won trophies, they've been the best team outside of those games in that time. This isn't like the West Indies having no one who can score over 30 in their T20 team, or England's serial top order of horror in the Test match cricket. India have plenty to work with. There are 2 years until the next World Cup, and they can try a lot of different combinations in that time. And I can't see any reason why they wouldn't want to do that. World Cups are about problem solving. You want flexibility through the players you pick or the 11s that you construct. And I think India has been incredibly rigid so far. So let's see if we can throw some things at a wall and what will stick. The biggest problem is that the batters at the top conserve their wickets because there isn't a lot of batting further on. Fine, we could fix that. On all these lists I'm going to throw up, the players' names I've used are really more archetypes of a type of cricketer who is currently available. And the other thing I would say is that the batting orders I put them in should be completely fluid. I'm not saying this person should bat in this position and this person should bat in this position, because in T20 cricket, you need to be a lot more fluid than that in general. But this particular 11 that I've come up with here is made so that the openers and middle order know that at number 8, the worst batting options might be someone like Washington Sundar. And you still have some batting at number 9 if you need it. You also, in this side, have a 6th bowling option, which you'll probably need because Jadeja and Hardik are not going to get you much more than 3 overs a match on average. But I'm willing to take a hit on bowling a little bit here because look at how much batting I have. This should unlock everyone at the top of the order. Someone like Shaw isn't really going to care who comes after him in the order. But hopefully for players like Samson, Rahul, Tripathi, it lets them know that they can go absolutely crazy at the top and back their talent. It's very rare you ever need any batting at number 9. So you could actually put another bowler in there who has no hitting if that works better. But what I like about this lineup is that there are so many players who attack different parts of the game. Left and right handers, spin hitters, pace hitters, floaters, all those sorts of things. It's a really nice collection. Also, if this was one of your plans, this is something you can build a really good depth chart around. It isn't that strong a bowling unit, but you have time to bring Umran up to speed, so to speak. You can also make one of your spinners into a power play bowler, giving you much more flexibility with the way you use your overs. And this lineup also allows for you to take wicket-taking options. If you can score 20, 25, 30 runs more than par regularly, and you have wicket-taking bowlers, chances are that you're going to win more games than you lose, and it's going to be very tough for the best teams to be able to chase anything against you, and also occasionally you will just bat everyone out of the game. So now let's look at a lineup that's all about spin. That may play a small part in that World Cup in America. This team could still bat to number 8 or 9, but look at the fun lineups you can have here. This gives you 3 seamers thanks to Hardik. You could, on sneaky occasions, try him as the second seamer if you wanted to, especially if you believe that the ball is going to spin all game and so one of your tweakers can bowl at the death. I wouldn't sell that to anyone, but I think that Hardik gives you those kinds of options. And of course, if you can do a spin side because of Hardik, because of Jadeja, you can also have a pace attack. I like this because it gives them the option to have real pace, death specialists, swing bowlers, seam bowlers, slow ball bowlers, whatever they want really. But it still has a couple of spin options in there. And in this case, you don't need your spinners to take wickets in the middle if Umar Malik and Harshal Patel are bowling there, because that's generally what they do. Here is an 11 of all-rounders. I don't think this team really makes that much sense for me, but it does bat until basically number 10. And if you wanted to, you could absolutely throw the bat like wire. You'd also have about 8 bowling options, which of course you will need, as there's not a lot of specialist talent bowling on show here. The point is that India could actually do this. It is something that is feasible to them. I'm not sure it's a long-term option, but again, it's something they can look at. And then we have our balanced 11. There is a few different ways to do this, but I really wanted this to be a team that has batting as far down as number 8, multiple bowling options, but still strike bowlers as well. You won't agree with many of these teams. They're quite extreme. I would say that India has probably toyed with some of these lineups already if you look at some of the games that they played in the last year as well. I'm not sure India would ever go as far as I have with them. But the point is, this is what the aggressive options look like. And India has been picking their most conservative choices again and again. And there's one thing that I really want to point out here. That for all the talk about how India have not maximized themselves, and they definitely have not, they still could have won a major tournament during this time. Part of it is just dumb luck. But from a T20 perspective, with a few small tweaks, they should be on a similar level to England or at least Pakistan. Extreme teams that are very strong in one area, which means that when you're playing them in a knockout game, they're so dangerous. The tricky bit is that to get there, India need to fail. And that obviously sounds a bit counterintuitive. But T20 cricket especially is about failure. You look at the better teams in the world and they don't win as often as you see in ODI and Test match cricket. The more time in the game, the closer we get to the best team always winning. T20 produces completely random results. It's a small sample size sport. So to really know who the best team is takes a long time. So more than any other format of cricket, you have to embrace losing. It's one of the first things I tell teams when I go to work for them. You are going to lose. Might be also why I'm not currently employed by any of them. England do. They're even taking it to their test cricket at the moment. They play a high variable game because they aren't looking to win every match by playing safe. They are putting themselves in the best possible position to win as many matches as possible overall with a style that should hold up under the most pressure. India clearly have good enough players to have won either of the last 2 titles, and things could have fallen their way so that that would have happened. They may not be better than England, but they are certainly on the same level as Australia and New Zealand. And in the last 2 World Cups, they have split their matches with Pakistan as well. But there's no doubt that India are under more pressure than any other side, and you can see it when they play, just to win every match. Losing a game for India is such a bigger thing than for any other cricket team in the world that it's not even worth comparing it. The pressure of that on every ball from a population that demands perfection in a sport that laughs at it is where we reach our impasse. Indian fans demanding cricket perfection is stopping their players from actually achieving it. The fear of failure is inherent to their style. You cannot have a fear of failure in this kind of sport. For every boundary you attempt in T20, there is a chance you're going to be bowled or hit the ball straight up in the air. That is just part of the game. At the start of this World Cup, I was doing a show called The Mood Ward, and one of the first questions I ever received on the Indian players was about if Suryakumar Yadav should continue to play aggressive shots. For those of you who don't know, he hits a boundary every 3.68 balls in T20 internationals in the last 2 years, while somehow still averaging over 40. If you can find someone better at attacking in world cricket at the moment, you're doing pretty well. But these numbers won't last. We know that because they're absurd and they basically can't last. And because if you factor in his other T20 matches, like the IPL, he's not quite at this level. So there is bound to be some regression. And when that happens, we know what people will say. On Twitter, they call him a merchant of intent, or an intent merchant, whatever they call it. Older fans who don't follow T20 as much will just say there should be another player who should come in. And he's the player playing without fear at the moment. You have a look at the rest of them in that World Cup, and there's absolutely no doubt that it was something holding them back. And it's not talent. But there is certainly a conservative push within Indian cricket to create all these anchors and all these spoiler bowlers, the safest options. Which means for a batter who needs to go out and score at a strike rate of 145, 150, 160, if they fail, everyone's going to be calling for their job. And if you're thinking, well, Indian cricket's always been like this. It hasn't always had this level of social media and WhatsApp and everything else that's going on. Every single mistake now is shown a million times. People who have no idea about how T20 should be played are focusing in on every attacking shot. And yet, as we know, attacking shots are the riskiest shots. They're going to come with failure. And the Indian team know all of this. They moved on from the old coach and captain, attacked more, and tried to do something new. They did all that in bilaterals, when Indian fans check in and check out, but mostly it's cricket fans who are watching. The World Cup isn't just for cricket fans. It's actually for casual fans. And so everything would have been hyped up, especially with the game against Pakistan to start with. And so under the harshest light of that World Cup, instead of continuing to attack, they went back to what they used to do. This is a pressure that we have perhaps never seen in sport. Perhaps we could look at Brazil or Argentinian football. But I don't think those fan bases care as much about friendlies. They just care about the World Cup, which allows Brazil and Argentina to get their teams ready in time for a major tournament. It does feel like in India, they need to win every single game of cricket. And as it currently stands, it does feel like that is what is holding the team back. They played like a team who cannot lose, and therefore they do. They're not overrated, they're not overpaid, and they're not chokers. But they are playing a flawed brand of cricket and not using the talent the best way that they can. But most of all, it does seem like they are failing because of a fear of failure. This is the bit we would play the Alanis Morissette song. But we can't, because I can't afford the rights. And also, for Indian fans right now, having watched my entire series, I think they'd want an even sadder song. But that's it for this series. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe, like, press the bell icon. Hit me up on Twitter or Instagram or Mastodon. Support us on Patreon. Join our Discord. Or tell your friends you found this really good YouTube page and it's this guy, but then you forget my name and you forget the name of the page and you're not sure what to say. And then in like 3 months' time, you're reminded of it again and you send your friends the link and they're like, yeah, we've already been watching that. Any way you could support us, please do.